I am RJ Kozane with PGH Art Talk with pghmuseums.org. This is the first time we've done any of the kind of like pandemic art talks. So I am here with Aaron Jack. Thank you so much for being the test subject for these and for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me be the test subject. I'm so excited to be here, the first one as part of your COVID quarantine art talks.
Yes, for sure. And I am elated to have you on the show. So as I was going through, you're in so many different facets of art. You do, right now, specifically line work, but you've done, I don't even know where to start. You've designed so many things from like wood and 3D printing and a bunch of photography. You've come from my gig by doing art talks recently on Instagram. So look out for the lawsuit coming soon. Just kidding. But you've been everywhere. And I don't like, how would you describe yourself, first of all, as an artist, as someone who has no idea who Aaron Jack is?
Well, I think it's a constantly changing thing, as each of us are constantly changing entity as we evolve and change ourselves. I just did an art talk earlier today. And the one thing that I talked about with this guest, because then I'm the one interviewing, so it's really interesting it being turned around here, which I love.
Yes.
I love that it goes in both directions. I think that change is the only thing that's inevitable within our lives, and probably taxes and stuff like that. But change is inevitable in our lives. So I feel like that's who I am as an artist, and that's what I have to give as an artist, is the change that I perceive in the world and the change that I perceive in myself.
We should, I guess, just start with the Instagrams, because you, first of all, have so many monikers on Instagram. I don't even know where to catch them all. What are they? So, do
I've
you
got a
know
couple.
all of them?
Yeah, well, I know most of them. And then I just I don't know, I got into it, and so my main one right now is my Aaron Jack line art.
Yes.
That's my main one. For right now. The main one that I've been going off of for years is Aaron Jack and Dot Photography. And then I have a couple others that are into like my dance photography work and my music photography work, but that's kind of like more specific to those things. So those are my two main ones. And right now I'm bringing back I Am Aaron Jack. So
Okay. I don't think I found that one yet, so I'm gonna write that down.
it's just being reborn. So some of these I worked with for a while, and then I bring them back. Just it's different ways to connect with people and different things, different aspects of myself. So that it gives me more freedom, I feel like, to branch out and to reach into new ways, because I was so embedded into the photography for so long, and I felt kind of constrained by, oh, that's who I am. And so just starting off with my line art account again, like, because I've been working on that series. It started off with just like line art work, and now it's expanded like far beyond that. So it's kind of like online, really. It's really Aaron Jack online.
That is a really good way to spin that. And with the Aaron Jack line art, so right now, since we're focused on the Instagram, you're doing two things, really three things over there that are like big into the forefront. Your line art, first of all, which is most important. The artist talks, where you're bringing an artist on and doing what we're doing right here. And you have a music and paint series as well. Have those two things where you're bringing people on to collaborate all started because of like the pandemics? I noticed most of them are recent. Or is it something that's been like festering that you wanted to do for a while, to branch out and collaborate in those different kind of forms?
Well, let's start off with the interviews. I've been doing interviews. I've been interviewing people for years with my video work. So a lot of that was with Richie Cole, who recently passed away.
I saw that, and I am sorry to hear that too.
Yeah, it's been really a really challenging time for that as well, because I've been documenting his life and documenting what he's talked about, and we've gone on tour through Vegas, and you know, it's just so the world gets very interconnected very quickly. Um, so so I was doing all that, and I was always on the other side of the camera, just doing the filming part and asking the questions from the other side of the camera, and not really on the camera. And I feel like I learned a lot from watching people be on the other side of the camera by talking and all of that. And I'd be setting up the lighting, be setting up the cameras, all of that. And I guess this whole thing, it just gave me the thing I needed to break out from the one side of the camera, and and have that like interaction, that change up of what I'd learned over the past bunch of years from watching all of the interviews. So I'm like, I'll be on the camera as well. And then the music and paint thing came about um, because I know about this thing called the Jam Nation. It's out of LA, and basically they were meeting up every week, and they just jam out and play all non covers and a lot of improvisational stuff. And they started with Instagram Live, where they had one person host and then brought on different musicians, kind of like an open mic night.
Yeah.
But because of the format of Instagram Live, it's not just like, oh, hey, I'm up in front of a bunch of people. It's you're inside this box. So I was like, oh, while the one person's jamming, I could paint. And so I started doing that, and I was like, oh, I could just have my own music and paint thing. So that's kind of how I shifted. And because I was painting this whole series of portraits right as this COVID pandemic started, I I just realized like I could shift into the abstract and feel more free. So a lot of this is, as I talked about earlier, that change, that ability to feel free and just like expand and try new things.
We bring that up. I bring that up so much with all of the artists that have been on the show so far. It's like you mentioned, like being in photography and feeling like that is kind of like sucking you into this box. And it seems like there's always some kind of box that artists are trying to be shoved into, whether it's like doing it yourself or the people who are seeing what you're doing. And what I'm learning is, and I didn't even realize this as much, is like how free you can be, and that you don't have to define yourself by like one specific subject, even when it comes to line art. So now you are online art and you're doing all of these things with that account, and it's like nothing is defining you. It's just like, here's Aaron Jack, here's what I have to offer to the world creatively, and take it or leave it, basically. And regardless, like you're experimenting and you're finding like different ways constantly, and it's an evolution that I think mimics life, really. I don't think art gets enough credit for imitating what we go through as human beings. So that's all very well put. And I do want to get to all of that because you've been involved in so many facets of art. But first, I do want to go to what is current. And you have an exhibition in this insane time right now at the Soap Gallery, which is in Youngstown, Ohio.
You're on it. You're so on it. I'm impressed.
I try to do my research here. First of all, I'm so on it that I Googled, for the Pittsburghers who are watching this, Youngstown is an hour away. You can make this drive if you feel safe and free to. It is called Carbon Connection, and there is an opening event. You may have heard of it, called Ink. And before I dive into it, I want to hear it in your words, like how did this all come about?
So because I was working with the music and paint series, um, I started thinking about, okay, what are other people that I could collaborate with? I'm working with all these musicians. I started working with musicians in Mumbai, and I now worked with musicians in Italy, in LA, and Pittsburgh, Binghamton, New York, all over. I just have like I've worked with so many musicians on this that I was started to like question like, oh, what could be in the second screen? It became this like question of like, I'm painting, I'm then painting with myself, I'm painting with others. What could I do with other people to collaborate and to create? So I thought it'd be really cool to, one of the ideas was to create with a chef, and Rasul, the Ronin chef, popped up on my Facebook feed. I was like, oh, that's interesting. We've been friends or whatever since 2005, so 15 years now, which
Long
will soon be
time.
more, as time rolls on. But 15 years we've known each other. So he popped up, and he was a photographer. I'm a photographer, and so now he's doing this whole thing with being a chef. I was like, sweet. I was like, boop 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 boop.
As you
Now,
do.
yeah, that's how I boop 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 boop. That's how I do it. I make the sounds while I type.
I do too.
It's so important. So I reached out to him, and he said, give me a week, some time. And he came back, and he brought a team. He brought his like project manager, social media person. He brought the gallery, and he said, I'm not just gonna collaborate with you, and like do my thing. He's like, I'm gonna make you ink. And I was like, wow, that's cool.
Yes, that is very cool.
I was
I
like,
didn't expect the collaboration to go that deep, first of all.
right. I guess that's really where it is not knowing where it's gonna go, where the collaboration's gonna go, and be willing to take it there.
Yeah.
He's in Cleveland, I'm in Pittsburgh, and he's shipping them, and I'm opening them up, and he's making them on Instagram Live and shipping them. So it was like really cool, just like getting to work with him and see that collaboration grow, and being able to see where he's at and his experimentation with his food, and see how like that inspires me to then experiment with my art, my art in different ways, and
Yeah.
then his art, and see the relational, the how they align. And so then he brought in this gallery, the soap gallery, and then it turned from me painting on the loading docks to then I'm going to be putting up a couple pieces, to then I'm going to be having a solo show, and then I'm having a full solo show for a month, and it's just all very interesting, and we live in interesting times.
We do, for sure. And before we get to those kind of times, I just want to say, first of all, art and food does not get enough credit for being an art form. Like, if I have friends whose eyes are glazing over because I'm starting to talk music production and they're like, I don't know what you're talking about, related to food, and it's like, okay, they're brought back because everyone gets it. And even if you're doing something like to a science, I don't know how this ink world works, but if you're baking, the science of baking is still like an art form in and of itself. So this collaboration, that is what like struck me and grabbed me in the first place. And the fact that it's meshed so well between the two of you is it even heightens it for me. So that's great. And the ink, I was looking it up. I don't know if I got it right. I saw that Russell Welsh, is using edible Sumi ink.
Well, so then we took it a step farther, where he's not only making me ink, is where he's also taking a lot of those same ingredients, and he then made a sauce, like a Japanese sauce.
Okay.
So this is a Japanese ink traditionally, and then he went and took those like a lot of the same ingredients, not all of those ingredients, but a lot of them, and he then made a sauce out of them. So that at the opening event, which happened like 2 weeks ago,
Yeah.
hopefully we'll be doing more and bringing it to Pittsburgh and however else.
I hope so.
Right? So if anybody knows a gallery who wants to experiment with this, we've got a thing for you. We've got a thing, or a museum, or anybody that wants to, hang some work and have an interest and have like an innovative concept to be brought to you.
A
Um,
socially responsible venue.
yeah,
This is how this is being billed.
right. No, this is the socially responsible and just responsible for like what's happening in the world. So he made kits, right? He made meal kits that people picked up at the gallery, and then people took them home and made them themselves, like or finished them themselves with a Zoom link. So people came back online, so they got to see the art in person, and then pick up the meal kit, get to meet him, learn about it, and then finish the meal online. So it's like a tiny little bit of cooking class, a plating thing.
And it would be
Um,
him too on the Zoom, like giving the
yeah,
step-by-step instructions, right?
right. So it kind of like gave this like multi-layered approach to how art and food could be combined and also be responsible in this time because we had appointments. So people picked it up during these periods of time to see the show, to pick up the food, and it just became a way for people to see the show as well as have like an amazing gourmet meal.
Please check their Facebook beforehand and make sure you can go. I did see something about tickets too. Are we still doing like the meal kit thing in the Zoom link, or is it just your artwork that's up right now?
So right now it's just artwork.
Okay.
That's what it is for now. Things might change. Check the Facebook event. Check
Yes, check
the
it every
yeah,
day.
check the Facebook event before you come. Right now the plan is that I'll be there the next 2 Saturdays and Sundays. So I don't know when this is going to go live, but I'll be there through August 2nd on the weekends, basically. And there's a link in the Facebook description, which I'm sure you can link to,
Yeah.
um, that will have. I set up a thing online so you can book like appointments. So that way I can make sure that there's only so many people in the gallery at a time.
Okay, very nice. And when they get to the gallery, what kind of artwork from you can they expect to see inside? Like, is there any specific premise that the line work is, or is it all experimentation? What do we got?
This idea of carbon connection, that's really what the work is about, is that I've found a way through this online to connect with others. And I think that's what we have with a physically distant world. How do we connect with others? And that's really what this work comes to explore, is how we can have these connections with, say, music, with art, with whatever it is. We're not on top of it. We don't necessarily need to be inside of it, but how we can have an authentic, real relationship with it, with whoever's on the other side of the screen, whatever we're hearing, and that practice of coming into connection with each other and with what we're making. So for me, there's all of this work that's exploring how to connect to others, where I'm taking the music and bringing that into a visual art. And I'm doing this live. So then a lot of the musicians are then taking, I learned this from Sumi, who I did this collaboration with she's in Mumbai, I'm in Pittsburgh.
Mhm.
And she was doing a sound healing thing. She does the Ayurvedic sound healing work.
Okay.
And so she's doing her thing from India, and I'm doing my thing in Pittsburgh. And she talked about this idea of a figure eight of energy, is how to create it so that we're giving and receiving. And I've tried to incorporate those ideas into my work so it becomes part of the flow. So this art that's being seen is part of this flow of energy.
Through the end of the month, through August 2nd, you said, is there going to be like
Through
a
August
closing,
2nd.
or is that kind of like the last day? How does it work? And as
So
of
as
today.
this whole time has been very strange, and you never know, things can change at any point in time, and that's why I highly suggest like checking out my Instagram on Aaron Jack Line Art, and I'll be updating that, and the Facebook event. So, and feel free to DM me if you have any questions. But it's really just like come in and explore that art, and I'll be there, and if I'm not there, then one of the co-owners of the gallery will be there, and you can take half an hour, to look through. And if there's more time, feel free. There's also a parking lot right outside, like a large open parking lot that anyone is, free to come create and play music or whatever, and hang out outside. So there's a physically distant space outside, so you can hang out, you can talk to people, but also come in and see the art. So there's kind of like this connection, and also there's so much beauty around Youngstown. I want to say that, like, Youngstown, there's so much natural beauty right around there. So there's some beautiful parks. Mill Creek Park, I've heard, is beautiful. So it's only an hour away from Pittsburgh, about.
Only an hour. Make a day
Only an
trip out of
hour.
it. Do
Only an,
something.
yeah, exactly. Well, it's a day. It's kind of like, a little trip. It's a little trip out of the city. Get out of the city and see something new and explore some art. And I must have like 100 pieces up there.
That's a lot of pieces to go see. So everyone should definitely check that out. Youngstown, Ohio is called the Soap Gallery, and it's up through August 2nd. And getting far away from that, but not really line art. I want to stay on that subject because we're
Yeah.
there, we're in it with this exhibition. I was scrolling through the Instagram, and I've seen you do kind of like abstract stuff sometimes. And then you also have the 100 portrait challenge that you were doing. How is that coming along? And was that self-appointed or did someone challenge you?
No, I challenged myself.
Okay. The
That's a
distinctions,
big
like the societal pressure, whenever someone's like, you have to do 100 portraits, like, no, but let me
no.
do a song a day myself. It's all right.
Yeah. I think sometimes the challenges are just to start it and continue to do something every day and put it out there. That's really um just challenging myself to make a lot of portraits and put one out a day for a while was really what it's about. Um for me, it was reconnecting. It was creating pieces that were about wonderful people who I had met in through my multi-month trip through San Francisco down to LA, and just the beautiful smiles that they had within themselves and they brought inside of myself. So bringing that photography back into painting, I found a new way to connect with people, new way to connect with my own work as well as connect with people. So, like, who are out there beyond my physical space.
Definitely see that in the line work, especially with the abstractions now that you kind of explain it, like kind of like going through and seeing how can you still connect even though another person is not necessarily in the next room as you.
I know you'd asked me about the Fringe Fest gallery. Um,
Yes. Fringe was one of the Pittsburgh events that happened digitally, I think, this year. And
yes,
I mentioned that in an email to Aaron. I was just like, what did you do here? And I saw that you did some curatorial work, something like that.
yeah. So I'll explain that. So Fringe is the largest arts festival in the world, like mostly performing arts.
Yeah.
Um, and the biggest one is in Edinburgh, and we have in Pittsburgh. We're very lucky. We have Dr. Fringe, Shayla. She got her doctorate in Fringe Fest, and so she runs the Pittsburgh Fringe Fest now. I think it's year number 5 or something like that, 5 or 6.
Mhm.
And because of this whole thing, it went online. So we talked about it, and then I ended up creating a virtual gallery and curated a bunch of different, maybe I think 8 different visual artists and a couple performers to be in that space, and then created talks around it. So connecting with the artists, getting their work, putting it up. I thought it was really cool, but then I was like, oh, what did I really enjoy from this? From which I really enjoyed the curatorial process, and I'm going to probably be going back into that very soon.
It's always nice to put together like a group of work and then
Yes,
present it.
right, because then it's like, oh, I see all this together, and it's like a virtual space, so you're like
Yeah.
going through. So it's really cool seeing like, oh, here's like all the cool art that I'm experiencing, and here are the cool people, and how can I connect to them, and how can I show their work and show them with other people, share their work and their ideas with others.
You see a lot of like incubation periods and ways that artists are reaching out where you necessarily like haven't before. Um, Especially the more like nuanced areas, like something like Pittsburgh Fringe Fest, where I would be like, oh no, what's going to happen to all those artists who are probably reaching out for emergency funds trying to figure out like what they're going to do at this point. So it is nice that you see you kind of get like the corporate side of things like pushed away for a little bit, and then you see what the creative people can really do, and that we can still bring together communities and just put things together as if we would any other way. So I really like the connectivity of that. And speaking with someone who is doing it, it's nice that there are people out there who are doing it, and it's great. Yeah.
Well, I think that's the part for all of us, is that we all need to play a part in lifting each other up.
You've done a ton of photography work as well, as we mentioned in the beginning. I'm just going to run down this list of where it's been placed. You have been Microsoft, CNN Digital, BBC, NBC News, The Daily Beast, Vice Media, Politico, CBC News, Vox Media, Time. Excuse me. How did you get into photography? Switching gears completely. Those are some big accomplishments, and we love to hear it from Pittsburgh artists.
Awesome. Well, thank you. So yeah, a lot of those have been in the last 2 years. And so what got me into photography? I I guess photographing as a kid. I went, and going to Chatham Day Camp and photographing there, and Center for the Arts. Going to all of their programs and learning in the dark rooms every summer. And then just like expanding that then with Kappa and Governor's School, and I just kept going with the photography and kept shooting and working with, came to work with a lot of dancers and musicians and different performing artists. And then Point Park, and I still have photos up at the Point Park Dance Complex, which you can go check out whenever they're open, because I have no idea. But I still have photos there that are up on some walls, and yeah, so I just kept going. It's one of those things with life, just keep going, 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 shooting, 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 and then recently, just a lot of different publications just kept picking up my work and running. I was like, awesome, just keep going.
Yeah, and is there a certain like approach that you take to photography, because you've done so many different facets of it, from like commercial to experimental dance? Jazz musicians are really big with you, which I love, and then just like settings and places. Is it more like I can see with people like, okay, here's how I'm going to connect through the lens? Is there like a way that you approach a specific session? Like, is there one that you think like sticks out, like this is concrete, like the Aaron Jack way, or is it always all over
Jack way? Oh, interesting. The Aaron Jack way. I feel like with any situation, just working on. I'll show you an animation that I did, actually, that might describe it. I've been getting into a lot of Zen philosophy for the last few years, and specifically into the work of Paul Reps. And he had this book that he collected a lot of Zen cones. It's called Zen Flesh, Zen Bones. I highly suggest it.
Noted.
Yes. And one of them, it's about this academic who comes and he walks into the space of a Zen teacher and says, teach me about Zen. There's a Zen monk sitting there, and the academic comes in and he says, teach me about Zen. And the monk, he has, starts to serve tea, and he starts pouring the tea, and then it starts to overflow, and he's like, why is it And the academic says, why is this overflowing? And the monk says, well, you've got to come in here, without any of your preconceptions, without any of your, previous notions of what this is. And so I, because you have to come in here with an empty cup.
Yeah.
So I thought about that and just like started to think about that. It's like, that's really what this really is how to come into situations with an empty cup, just like without the preconceptions of what this is, what this should be, and relook at like what it could be, or not even look, just be open to the experience. And I think there's a lot more nuance in there, but I like taking those concepts and finding the physicality in them. It's kind of like it's an experiment. It's kind of like a science experiment in the philosophy of it. So I went and I like wrote the words "an empty cup" and then put it, and then I was like, oh, like these words actually fill the cup. Even though you empty the cup, even the words themselves fill the cup. So it's kind of like how to come in even without the words.
Yeah, coming at any kind of project, whether it's like photography or on my end of things like music or filmmaking, it's always like it feels daunting until you clear everything out, and then there's room for the experimentation or the science experiment that happens. Yeah, so that's definitely words of wisdom with Aaron Jack for PGH Museums Art Talk.
Right? There we
Yes.
go. There's our words.
You work in all these facets, and I'm assuming that it just translates, it does, from medium to medium, especially with design work, which we kind of dip into as well. There's a 29-page document, which I did not read all of, so I am not fully prepared here, but I saw a wooden toy. You've worked with wood to create like a honeycomb type of thing with bees. You've worked with steel and printmakers, and is any of that in the works? Are we focused more on line art, or is it all
I think
blending at this
there's
point?
you bring up some good points. I appreciate you bringing these up. Some of my portfolio design work. I think there may be some things in the works, but I'm not sure what and where, because it always is kind of like I have all these ideas, they're all floating up there, in these clouds, and then
Don't forget them.
yeah.
Yeah, when they're gone, they're gone. If they're in the clouds, you have to grab them first of all. I will cut you off to tell you that, but continue.
Thank you. But for me, they kind of like they're like swirling up there, and then I'm kind of like waiting for the right ones to be in the right places, and then there's kind of that electricity that comes down and strikes at the right point in the right time. And so hopefully, I take this from Cartier-Bresson, which is also kind of a little Buddhist idea, but he takes some different inspiration in it. But his thing is all about the moment, that singular moment, that everything's in perfect alignment. Um, and that's really what it is with, I think, any of it is finding those times where there's the perfect alignment, and that's when to take the picture. I have one more that I'd like to share, like how yeah, this one, experimenting, has been amazing because it's kind of put me into a little bit of a directorial role. I talked with Casey, he's the musician, and I was working with Gabby, who's the dancer, and we were talking about some different things. And so for me, that's just like taking my ink work and bringing it into whole new realms of kind of like multimedia. So that's another thing that you'll get to experience in the show, is a lot of this multimedia that I've been working on, and how we can go from here's the evidence, here's the analog understanding of this internal perspective, to let's start to understand how it exists within a new kind of connection, a new kind of collaboration. How is this carbon really connected to all of these people? And I really started thinking about carbon as that way because of Casey, because of like I started talking about these different ideas that I was working with Rasul, and he really brought that up in a new piece that I'm working on with him and an amazing dancer Natalie Lamont. So it's just like being able to like build that trust,
which is not an easy feat either. So the fact that you get all these collaborations and they work out so well, especially with the Carbon Connection one, is fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It really just like, it's a matter for me of just like following my inspiration and just being like, oh, I'm excited about this. Like this piece of the last thing excited me. Let me figure out how to like take that on and experience that a new way, or try it again. And even if it didn't work, like how can I try it in a slightly different way to make it like do something? So I guess it's kind of like that design side of me, just like wanting to get out and experiment and see what's possible.
I cannot wait to see whatever comes out of all of that in the future, especially with what we've seen here. Thank you so much for sharing those videos and everything. Just to round out and to make sure everyone knows, number one, I did my research. So it was your birthday last month on the 13th. Happy birthday.
Thank
and
you.
More importantly, Carbon Connection is in Youngstown, Ohio. It is an hour drive from Pittsburgh. Make a day trip out of it, a responsible one. And go see it while it is up through the beginning of August. And thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for sharing everything. This is Aaron Jack with the pilot episode of the Social Distance Art Talk with pghmuseums.org.
Sidekick Media Services. We are your sidekick in business for social media, video production, and more. Find out more at sidekickmediaservices.com.
Thank you for listening to Art Talk from pghmuseums.org. Your host today was RJ Kozane, and the program was edited by me, Brian Crawford. Today's music was Wallpaper by Kevin MacLeod and can be found at filmmusic.io. It is licensed through the Creative Commons. Be sure to search PGH Art Talk on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are found. PGH Museums is made possible through our members and affiliate museums, such as the Punxsutawney Weather Discovery Center. Become a tornado. Make a thunderstorm. Be a TV weather forecaster. You can do all of this and more at the interactive Punxsutawney Weather Discovery Center, located in the home of Punxsutawney Phil. Learn more at weatherdiscovery.org. We'll catch you in 2 weeks, right here on Art Talk from pghmuseums.org.